It's really a pleasure to see you all here. I have a bad habit. I do go over time sometimes. I'm not quite sure how to work on that, but I'm going to help you work on some of your bad habits, hopefully. So let me just give you a little bit about myself. Family is the most important thing to me. And that's what fuels me to do the things that I do, even standing up here before you. And I have my family members at the front here. My daughter, Ria. My niece, my brother, my sister, and my sister-in-law. So it's important that we have things that make us feel happy. And I'll say a bit more about that, how that links to habit-forming behaviours that are positive. Rishi already told you about my professional and academic background. Addiction therapist I am, but I like to see myself as a dual diagnosis therapist, and that's what I'm going to start calling myself, because I actually work and specialise in working with people who have both addiction issues and mental health issues at the same time. They are habitual behaviours, but they are extreme behaviours. Today we're not going to be talking about those kinds of extreme habits. So I have a bachelor's, a master's. I'm a member of the British Association of Counsellors and Psychotherapists. That's who registers me. I am ethically guided by them. And I'm also recently have become a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. Very exciting for me, because they have the same kind of philosophies that I build my practice on, and that's giving to society to try and make society a really wonderful place for people, giving them the opportunity to meet their potentials. And habits is the business that I've started. How appropriate. I have got cards, so you can pick up one later on. Habits started with me having a look at myself, doing some self-investigation about my own mental processes as a result of issues that I faced as a middle-aged woman. I'm 52, and so I'm sure most of you know what kind of issues I'm talking about. But it's the best thing that could have happened for me, because I downed tools and I looked at my life and said, where am I going to go with it? And I can say today, this is one of the highlights of that journey so far. So here we are. We are going to go straight into it. I've been asked by the university to present a lecture on bad habits. But let's have a look. What have these images got in common? What's the link? Let's not go for the obvious. I could have said that before, I didn't want to. What's the link? That's good. That's good. They are habits, and yes, they are positive habits. But they're also habits that I consciously chose. Because I'm wondering how many of you have habits that you have been consciously aware of. So, this is something that I hold dear to myself and in the work that I do, that we are all creatures of habits. And we do have the power to choose which habits to be creatures of, but I wonder how many of you believe that. Only 4 people in the room put their hands up. Is there more people that believe that you have the power to choose your habits? That's good. Are you struggling? You are. So where do you believe that power is coming from? Is that what the issue is? That you just want to tap into that power? That's why you're here today? You can admit it, because it's true. I would be here if I wanted to know. So, here are some statistics. We're talking about bad habits in the workplace. That's what I've been asked to deliver. But what I'm going to share with you can go across any habit. So because the focus is on workplace habits, I'm just going to give you a little bit about that, yes? Because that's important. So, 15% of employers have fired a worker for calling in without a legitimate reason. That legitimate reason is a bad habit. How many people in their lifetime, how many people here have just rang in, I can't make it today, without legitimate reasons? Maybe none of you, but some people have. At least 15% of this cohort had. 22% have fired employees for using the internet. I know that at least 50 or more of you guys are guilty, yes? But maybe to a small degree, yes, okay. Because you all look like you're hard-working people. Okay, 22% of employers know someone who's been fired for wasting time or disrupting other employees. We're going to look at some of those bad habits that would fall under these 22%. 33% have disciplined an employee for violating social media. So we're kind of talking the same thing. We look at the internet, we're talking Facebook, Twitter. It's fast becoming the tool that everyone is using. I see it. I'm walking on the streets, or I'm cycling, because I'm a cyclist, as you saw from the picture. And it's quite frightening how many times I've missed just hitting someone because they're on their phone. They don't recognize that they've even developed that habit. That's the most frightening thing. And so we're going to find out a little bit more about how we can get to the bottom of that. These are some of the other reasons. Lying on a resume and in a... Why did you laugh? Is that a guilty laugh? Okay, so we'll move on. So here are 14 bad habits at work. This is a link to the website where you can get this information, more on it. So we have, well, you can see what we have. Procrastination, dishonesty, you have tardiness, being late, social media addiction. But are there any up there that's surprising you? Okay. I don't know, do you have anyone at work that all they do is complain about absolutely everything? Even when there's no reason to complain, because sometimes there are reasons. Okay, your managers don't like those type of people. Why? Because they see it as a bit of a cancer. It pervades and it spreads, doesn't it? And everyone in that office starts to feed off of that negativity. Managers like an environment where one can work effectively, efficiently, happy, content. Because if you're happy and content, you work well, yes? Okay. Again, like I said, if you go onto the website, you can get a list of these, because that's where I got this information. For those of you who use the internet in work, maybe. But yes, there's a list of these and why these habits can be harmful. I think the key is that on their own, they may not cost you your job, but it says a little bit about who you are, what kind of an attitude you have. It will also, your manager, for instance, if you have these little habits, they're going to start looking at you. They're going to focus on you, and they're going to look out for other little habits that you may have. And if you put those together, what would you get? You'd get someone that's maybe not the right person for your team or for that environment. I tell you what, ask the questions after, Mick. Lone wolf, okay, sorry, I'll answer that then now. It's about working on your own, believing that you don't need to work with other people, you're not a team player. We need team players. If you're in an office with other people, it works best. So, let's look at the theory of what is a habit. I'm going to just throw it out quickly. What is a habit? Because I'm sure most of you may have your own... Regularly. Sorry?
Something that you do regularly.
Good.
Consciously or subconsciously.
Ah, well that's... Everyone agree? Okay, well, it is a routine that we repeat on a daily basis, but as a habit, it has become automatic, it actually functions mostly under conscious awareness. You're not usually aware of the habit until you are told to be aware of it for various reasons. But let's give you some information about habits. It does take a while to develop. It's a very slow process. On average, it takes 66 days. So we're looking at roughly 2 months. That's on average. But if you look at a range, it can be anything from 18 days, which is 3 weeks, to 264 days, which is 9 months. So they are on the extremes, but we're all individuals, and some people develop habits differently from others. That's all that is saying. On a psychological level, it's a fixed way, not just of behaving, and I think that's quite an important aspect to take in with habits. It is about your thoughts, it's about your feelings and your behaviors. And we will touch a little bit on the cognitive processes in terms of thoughts and feelings. And it becomes automatic through the process known as habit formation. Habit formation, another word for that, is automaticity. So John Barge is a social psychologist, and he has been researching automaticity for decades. He wanted to get an understanding of how automaticity and non-conscious cognitive processes affect the way we behave with each other. And this is what he postulated. He looked at it, he says it results from learning, repetition and practice, and that it has 4 characteristics. I'm not going to go into this too much, because this is a bit too deep level, and it's not necessary for you to learn about habits and how to change them per se, but it's information that you can go off and look up. But it has got characteristics which makes it a habit, and that's awareness. And it says awareness, but actually what it means is most habits happen under your cognitive awareness. You are not aware of that habit once it becomes automatic. That's the key. Once it's automatic, you can do it without thinking about it. And I know that you know this. From what? What are the automatic behaviors that we have? Okay. Driving, talking, walking.
Breathing.
That actually happens, yes. On the autonomic system, if it didn't, we'd die. So we need that. Intentionality is talking about the involvement you have with the initiation of a habit. That's under conscious awareness also. Efficiency, this is the best bit of a habit. This is the bit that I like the most. It is fundamental to all learning. It is integral to us as human beings, because if we didn't have it, this form, that characteristic, we would hardly learn anything. So we've got to be able to shift a lot of the information we learn into long-term memory. And that's why it becomes automatic, because you've got to free up the part of the brain, which is your short-term memory and your working memory, for new material. So it's very important. So this efficiency is talking about low cognitive resources. It doesn't take much, and you will know this, because when you're driving your cars, you can have a full-blown conversation, get to your destination, and not even remember how you got there. That's automaticity. It is it gets rid of those low-level details that the brain just doesn't need to perform that action. So now you can kind of have an idea of why we have habits and we get stuck with the bad ones. Because it is in that long-term memory. It's very hard to shift it until you put these 4 characteristics into play. So what we're going to focus on, controllability, it's quite simple. It's talking about that once the behavior has been initiated, it is very difficult to stop it in its process, unless you have strategies to do so. So we're going to focus on the habit loop. Anyone know about the habit loop? Every single habit has these 3 dimensions. It is the cue. It is the behavior. And what usually comes after what usually keeps your habits going?
Repetition.
No. There's a loop, but what is... Okay, that's exactly what it is, the reward. Because think about it, I mean, if we talk about my role, my professional role as an addictions therapist, I deal with this on a daily basis. You have people creating harm in their lives that can cost them their life. They lose family, health, job, house for habits that they wish they could get rid of but can't. It's because it has a reward element. We may not see it as a reward, but it is. It is a positive reinforcement for whatever it is they are nursing or medicating, because that's what it is at the end. So let's look at a loop. So this is very simple terms. Forgive me if it's simplistic, but it makes it easier to understand. The cue is traveling. I need to get to somewhere. I'm going to a meeting. My cue is, how am I going to get there? The bigger picture is, I am on a health kick, on a health regime. So I need to develop a habit that's going to enhance that health regime. So the habit is cycling. So I've had a cue, I need transport. I could get a bus, I could get in the car, but I don't want to. I want to kickstart this habit, so I'm going to cycle. What is the reward? Feeling fit and healthy. That's the loop that's going to keep me going. Let me show you another loop. Okay, we're going to look at... I know many of you can resonate with it. I can, because this was me years ago. So, you know, it was very easy to write this one up. So the cue is the alarm clock. The bigger picture is you've got to get into work. Okay. Alarm clock rings. The routine is you press snooze 5 times or even more. Even once might be enough because it might not come on again. What is the reward? And remember I said everything has a reward, even if it's irrational. And it says more time resting. Yes, it may be more time resting, but you're going to be late for work. And what happens when you're late for work? Sorry?
You feel guilty.
You feel guilty. And what else can be happening? Stress. That's a very good one. Your stress. Your boss is on at you, you're on at yourself. You're developing a reputation. That reputation then has a loop and feeds back into yourself. You start having negative self-thinking. Your confidence level starts to be affected. Your esteem starts to be affected. This is not for everyone, but for most people, this is going on and they're not even aware that that's what's causing this issue. Something with just being late on a regular basis. You're in trouble with the boss. You're then starting to affect other aspects, not just of your job, but of your life, because it's all inextricably linked. So, having said that, talking about the habit loop, what underlies all habits then, if that's the case? We could say that it's part of it, but it's something far more deeper and more an important place for us to look. Sorry? The routine, no. Thank you. The mind. The mind. It underpins everything that we do as human beings. It is the supreme controller. But we may not be aware of this fact. In a sense, it's evident because you weren't. Or are you now that you've heard about it? So what is the mind? Well, it's where it all happens, yes. It's the setting for cognitive abilities, isn't it? For judgment, reasoning, thinking, memory, all the things necessary for developing habits. Would you agree? So it's where you have your experiences of the world. All the representation you have of the world, the outside world, begins in your mind first. And I'm sure you've all heard that, haven't you? So it's the ability to think, feel, reason. It is where your intellectual self is. So it makes sense that that's where you should be looking. Yes? Okay, so we're going to now look at changing these habits then. Does anyone notice anything about this phrase? Not you, Ria. Don't cheat. Sorry? It spells habits. It took me a month to get to that. That was a habit in itself. I sat down looking for an acronym that was appropriate for habits. Habits are broken intrinsically through self-change. Can anyone explain what that means to them? Or for us? Okay. What did the other lady say?
I said it means it's internal. You have to make a conscious.
That's correct. That's the most important thing. The change happens from within. If you want it to last, it should happen from within. But there are aspects of changing habits that we need to be aware of in order to make that change. And one of the biggest is our motivation for change. That's what's really important about changing our habits. I could have put, you're not going to find any miracles here, but that, because you've got to do all the hard work. But I looked up what miracles meant, and I thought it was fantastic. What did it say? It says extraordinary events that are explained, cannot be explained by natural or scientific law. So I had to shift that one out. Because then we'd have to say it's not a miracle that's happening. But it also says it's an exceptional achievement or an outstanding experience. I want you to view, when you start to change your habits, as exactly that it is an exceptional achievement. Because I'm believing that if it wasn't, none of you would be sat here today. You would be able to do this, and you wouldn't need to be sitting in a lecture trying to see if you can learn other ways of doing this. So, here's the practice. So it's quite simple. You have a bad habit, but you've got to be able to identify that habit. And the best way of identifying some habits is asking. Asking people that you trust. Get feedback. Did you know that children learn a sense of self through feedback? And the reason we know that is feral children haven't got a sense of self because they actually grow in the wild. So we know it's a very important developmental process, getting feedback. But it's what you do with the feedback that's really very important. And one of the things I will encourage is don't be defensive about it. I absolutely adore getting feedback. That's one of the things that's put me where I am today. I could stand here and tell you about my upbringing and my life. I'm not going to. But it's feedback on my journey that made the biggest difference to my life about changing bad habits, because I had some really not so very good ones. So we write down the habit. Then we identify the cue, the routine, and the reward for that habit. So we're looking at the loop. You look at the loop because either you need to modify the cue or the reward. And that's what this third point is. What is a sabotaging irrational belief? More time in bed, more time resting. Would you say that's rational? Sabotaging? Irrational? Make sense? That in itself is a sabotaging belief. Because you may have more rest in the bed, but is it going to serve you well? And it's not going to serve you well if you're getting up late, then you're rushing around, going to work, being late, feeling stress, attacking yourself negatively. So then you write the new positive habits. See, one thing, you don't get rid of the habit by stopping it or extinguishing it. What you want to do is replace it. This is why it has a loop, because the routine may be the same. And in the case of your alarm clock, snoozing, it is the same, isn't it? The cue is exactly the same as well. The alarm clock is going to go off. But what you need to be changing in that respect then is the reward, or what you think the reward should be from a rational point of view. For some people, that's very difficult. And those people are the people that I work with. But I'm addressing you guys here. So I want to try and make it simple and look at some techniques that you can use to help you replace those habits. I'm having to take snippets out of these techniques because, like I say, I do work with people who are on the extreme ends of bad habits. So let's look at one of the techniques, motivational interviewing. I mentioned motivation. Motivation plays an inextricable part in the development of healthy behaviors. Why? Because motivation directs your behavior. It's that power source, the desire or the needs that you have to create that habit. So motivation is very important. So this is a brief therapeutic intervention. Highly effective. It's actually been recommended by NICE, the National Institute for Clinical Health and Clinical Excellence, for use in addictions, which are habits, and mental health. Motivational interviewing was written by two psychologists called Rolnick and Miller to prepare people for change. What I absolutely love about this intervention, although you can use it in addiction and mental health, you can use it across any change that you want to make. It has facets that are usable and transferable to make those changes. In a clinical setting, it is always a client-centered approach that is used. Remember I said that the habit has to be intrinsic. It comes from within you. So it's not about what I want for the client, it's what the client wants. And I'm not going to go too much into it. It is goal-directed, so we do set goals for you to make those changes so that you can measure them. They're SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and they're time-bound. That way you can follow it, you can keep up with it. You want to be able to evidence the change, and to evidence it you have to have goals and measurements to measure it from or against. And it enhances the intrinsic motivation. So it's about exploring the ambivalence, because we have them. You have a habit. You want to change it for a new habit. What is going on in between is the ambivalence. Why is it that I'm in this position here operating through this negative habit? I have a desire and a need to attain this goal, but something is stopping it. And that's what motivational interviewing tries to do, and it does it using this tool first, which is the cycle of change, and other tools. So let's look at the cycle of change. Is anyone aware of this, apart from Sabrina, who I know, because she works for an addiction service? You know about the cycle of change? Okay. So this is Prochaska and Di Clementes. They did research studies on several thousand people looking at the process of change. And what they came up with was these 6 stages of change. These are the 6 stages that they theorize people go through when they want to make changes. It can be controversial. It's not set in stone, but I like it because I've seen it work. I've seen how useful it is when you are working with people who want to make changes to their habits. So you have the pre-contemplation stage, which is outside of the cycle. Why is it outside of the cycle?
It's the motivation that gets you to think about it.
And what else? Why else would it be outside? What hasn't started? Why hasn't it? Because you haven't even recognized it's a habit. That's why it's outside. So why is it there then? Usually at this pre-contemplation stage, it's other people that notice that you need the change. Why it's outside the cycle. Especially in my field, I come across many people who came to the services I was working in previous to my private practice because they were coerced. I used to work for the drug intervention program. It was a criminal justice intervention, and people were coerced to come to the service because maybe they'd committed a crime. And so it was a requirement of their bail. Those would be pre-contemplators.
So, as a nurse, when you're using it with people giving up smoking, you use that cycle.
Of course.
And as a health visiting principle, the first thing you do is you just raise awareness.
And this...
That's it. And then you leave the person with it.
And this is why the cycle is important. That's exactly right. It is a form of intervention. It allows you to understand where you are in the cycle, because wherever you are in the cycle, there is an intervention that matches. Pre-contemplators don't even believe they have a bad habit. I'm going to use it just for the sake of the program. Don't believe they have a bad habit. Therefore, me trying to get them to change that habit will be quite ineffective, wouldn't you say? Okay, so at this stage, like the lady says, you give general information. In our practice, what we do is give leaflets, have them just allocated in nice areas where their eye may pass it. Or you just make general references about others who may have similar habits. That's what you would do for a pre-contemplator. I'm not going to stay too long on this. So the contemplator, this is probably where we're going to stop. Who is the contemplator? What is the contemplator? Okay, they recognize that they have a need for change, is what you're saying? But what else is going for them? Why it's a contemplator? Sorry?
Because he wants to change.
Go on, but what else? He hasn't changed. Why? That's it. That's exactly what it is. You have someone who has this habit that they know isn't good for them on one hand, but the ambivalence is it is serving a purpose on the other hand. It is that sabotaging, irrational belief that's keeping it going, and they are stuck in that habit. That is your contemplator. You have the three first stages are all cognitive. It all happens in the mind. This is why it's very important to understand your own mind, because that's where the change begins. It doesn't begin in the routine. It begins in your way of thinking. Very important. So you have a determination. You start to look at ways of how this is going to happen. Who do you need to get involved? What is going to be involved? What is the change? What are you going to be replacing it with? And then you kick into action. So your last three stages are your behavioral changes. Your action, and then your maintenance. And your maintenance is the automaticity. It's where the habit has become, or the routine has become the habit. So this is why you have the exit, the lasting change. But then you have relapse. So how many of you have tried to change a habit and have not succeeded so well? You've relapsed, haven't you? Okay. Now this is a very, very important stage in this cycle. It's not to be viewed negatively. How I would look at it is something happened in the determination when you was putting the plan together, because that's what your plan is. You've relapsed, but maybe not identified that particular thing that caused you to relapse. Remember, habits have become automatic. Therefore, it's under conscious awareness. There is intentionality involved. So what is happening here is you've not recognized a cue in your plan, but you've recognized it in your relapse, so it goes back into your plan, so you go back round the cycle again. So this is what happens. So these are the tools that are used to help narrow the ambivalence between where you are with your habit and where you want to be. We've got readiness rulers. Anyone know what they are? They're like Likert scales. On a scale of 0 to 10, how ready are you to change? If 0 is not ready at all and 10 is absolutely ready, where are you? Why are you there? How can I shift you up? What puts you in that position if it's more than a 0? And the same for commitment and the same for confidence. Those are your 3 rulers. Then you can start to look at the behavior that you're changing and then go back to your scale. Have you moved up the scale? Have you moved down the scale? What is causing it? This gives room for exploration. We're going to look at the decisional balance sheet. Another term for that is the pros and cons. The other sheets are the force field analysis and change plan worksheets. And this is what you would basically or primarily do with your therapist or with an interventionist. Say, for instance, you are struggling with your habits and you wanted to have a couple of sessions with me, then I would use these tools to help you if it's a struggle for you, doing it by yourself. My cards are here, you can pick them up later. No, I'm joking, but I'm not joking, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm being real. Okay, so this is what's called the decisional balance sheet. That it's the benefits and costs of no change, and it's the benefits and costs of change. So I've got an example, and I'm going to use the late one again. I think it's something that quite a few people struggle with, and it's something I know I did. I struggled with lots of different habits, but that was one that I think really used to create that anxiety and stress for me, and it was like a cancer. So let's look. So the no change is tardiness, continuing to be late. So with this, you can all do this, and it's easy. Just get a piece of paper, write a quadrant on it. Pros, cons for change. Pros, cons for no change. You could do it for any single behavior. Even initiation of good ones and not necessarily getting rid of bad ones. It still works for that. So, benefits, more time in bed. What else? For some, less time at work. That could be the reason why you're late. You know, these are just examples. Okay. What are the costs? I've put that as the top because people have been sacked for being repeatedly late. It is a disciplinary action. Damaged reputation. This is seeping into the way you feel as a human being. Problematic relationships at work. Other people having to pick up for you, possibly. You being stressed, the way that you're behaving is not likened. Your manager is starting to get a bit peeved with you. That's damaging the relationship you have with your manager. It can go on and on and on. You can think of all the other things that can come out of it. You're stressed from rushing. You're just stressed. You're not meeting targets. Stress is a silent killer. Do we know that? This is why it's very important that you know your mind. So all of these bad habits can feed into this stressful way of being that we know what they cause the illnesses. They cause heart attacks, diabetes, diminished career opportunities. So let's look at the change and what the benefits and the costs are for change. Punctuality. So I'm sure you can guess what some of these are, can't you? How would you be able to guess them in a sense? It would be. Primarily, it's going to be the opposite of whatever it was a disadvantage if you continued with no change. That's right. So then you have an enhanced self-confidence and self-worth. You feel better about yourself. You've achieved a goal for one. That is going to feed into what's known as self-efficacy. Your ability to then make other changes in your life. It's like a snowball effect. Better relationship with your colleagues, hopefully, that wasn't the reason why. Increase your career opportunities. There is something to be said about if you have one little bad habit, you have other bad habits that feed into you not being viewed as someone an employer will want to move up the ladder or that an employer would want to take on. I don't know if you looked at some of the lists about even your body language could be something that can put an employer off from taking you on. And these are things that you may not be aware of. This is why you've probably come today, and this is why I do this, because people aren't aware. So it's not about judging that you have the habits, it's just starting to become aware of them so that you can make a change. Sense of achievement and well-being. So that feeds into your self-confidence. And so what are the costs? Because there's always going to be a cost, losing a habit. Why? Because if there wasn't, you wouldn't have had that habit going on in the first place. So there's always a cost. So what is the cost? Okay. Ta-da. We're all scientists. Well, shortened night or evening because you're wanting to get up earlier, aren't you? So you may need to just go to bed earlier. Some of these are simple, aren't they? But sometimes it's the simple things that we bypass. We sometimes look for something that's more complex or complicated. You might need to modify your social life. Instead of every night, it may be 2 nights a week that you go to the pub, or you go to the pictures, or you go and have a time with your boyfriend. Whatever. Feeling tired because you are making an effort to get up. So that's the pros and cons sheet issue or the decisional balance sheet. So we're now going to look at another technique, which I think is incredibly important for every living human being, even children, if we could teach them. And it's mindfulness. Anyone aware of mindfulness? Does anyone practice mindfulness? You do. Fantastic. Okay, mindfulness simply is, it has 3 components to it, they say. It's about being in the present moment. It's about focusing attention on purpose. So this on purpose means with the view of just being in that moment. Having an idea of who you are and what your surroundings are and what is going on for you. It's really about decluttering your mind. Because first and foremost, it's about tapping into what your mind is doing. Most of us are on what's known as, and it's an apt term, automatic pilot. You will go about your day from the time you wake up to the time you go to sleep. Most of your actions are automatic. You have not paid attention or aware even, and this is the most important aspect, I believe, of mindfulness, your feelings, your emotional state. Because what is happening is your kids are in the way, the school is in the way, your work is in the way, your husband, the shopping, the laundry, all of that is in the way. These are automatic behaviors, aren't they? You don't need cognitive resources for it. So it's easy for you. We predominantly live in a society where most people are working 9 to 5. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say it may seem reckless. It is not the way our bodies were built. It really wasn't, which is why we have to rely on the cognitive misering resources that we have. which is why we are in automatic pilot. Because if we wasn't, a lot of what we do would not get done. Unless we choose to do things differently. And everyone has the choice to do that. This is why I love mindfulness. So, we're going to look at the 3 fundamentals, which I've already explained, is paying attention in a particular way on purpose. Does that make sense? It's not a unique intervention. It's come out of Buddhist philosophy, so it's thousands of years old. But it is relatively new to psychological and psychotherapeutic science. It's relatively new because now they're understanding how beneficial it is to our sense of well-being. Even corporate workplaces, hospitals, housing associations, there are many organizations that are now hiring interventionists like myself to come in and run these programs. Because once you can become aware of your mind and the way it operates, you become aware of your sense of self, and then you start to look at the changes that you can make that are beneficial to your lives and even those around you. So it's being in the present moment, which makes sense if you're paying attention. And in a non-judgmental way, again, we know that the mind is a setting for these cognitive abilities, one of them being judgment. We have to stand in a position where we can judge situations, but it's primarily talking about the way we judge our own emotions and thoughts. Many of us believe that our thoughts have to be adhered to. But mindfulness is saying, no, it doesn't, not in the way that we're habitually used to doing. Because what we are opinionated humans. That's the way we've grown up. That's what we've been led to believe. We have to slap an opinion on everything. Mindfulness is saying, no, you don't. You actually don't have to. You just have to be in that moment and just accept it for what it is. Now, me saying this to you now might not make sense. When I run this program, it's 6 sessions, and even after 6 sessions, you are still a newbie. It is still a habit that you have to form. You've got to go way down deep underneath to really understand what this all actually means.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
My point is, though, you talk about non-judgmental in a non-judgmental way. The point is, we make an opinion. That in itself is a habit.
Exactly. That's what I just said. This is why this is really, in a sense, a little bit complex, because you're having to develop a habit of being mindful. That's why I said the mind underlies the habit. You've got to have a healthy mind in order to make healthy changes. And this is one of the techniques that you can use to enable that to happen. So non-judgmentally, what you're then doing is you're starting to become aware, and you're paying attention to the judgment that you're putting on your thought. Is the judgment you put on the thought helpful? It really is as simple as that. You put the thought on trial. Do I have to accept it or don't I? What is the evidence for this thought? Yeah? And you can indict it, or you can put it, give it a sentence. Can't you? It could have life in some bin somewhere else. Write on a piece of paper, roll it up, put it in a bin. It's had a life sentence, it's not coming back out. Yes? Okay. So these are the things it evokes, mindfulness. Like I said, because this is a lecture, I'm going to have to give time for questions and answers. I can't go into the techniques here today. It would really, you'd be here till 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. You don't want that, I know. Yeah? At least giving you just the introduction. But it enhances greater awareness. It's awareness of you. That's what's important, the way that you think and the way that you feel. These are patterned. Our brains are hardwired. If you think of a computer, the wiring system is hardened. In order to change your habits, you've got to reprogram your system. So you've got to be aware of your patterns. Again, you know, I said that habits can take anything from 3 weeks to 9 months, depending who you are, how your brain processes. But that's just one. So I say miracles do happen, because they do, but don't expect these changes to happen overnight. You know, you might not even see the change. You might not notice it because you're busy getting on with your day. And then one day, these changes are occurring. People are telling you, oh, wow, you seem so much more relaxed. You seem so much more happier. You're not coming in late anymore. Oh, what a positive person you've become. All of these things can happen, but you do have to put the work in. No one else can do that but you. So this is why you get the clarity, you get an understanding of what is going on. Your focus becomes clearer. You start to see your life. And when you get into this state, you start to ask yourself questions. Am I really where I want to be? Could I be somewhere else? You have these development of bad habits for a reason. It's about not being aware of whether you're in the place that you want to be. Mindfulness helps you to understand, is it, this is where I want to be, or is there some other wonderful dream or goal that I would love to realize? This is what can happen out of it. It happened for me anyway. It happened for many people. That's why mindfulness is so effective. So we're talking about not being judgmental, so you can replace being non-judgmental or judgmental for being curious. Curious, I love curiosity. Who does it remind us of? Who? Children. They're so curious and they're so innocent, and they learn. They learn beautifully as well, don't they? They don't hold on to grudges. They're not very judgmental. Curiosity, my goodness me, it opens doors for you. It opens opportunities for you. Openness and acceptance. This is just about accepting that we are human, accepting that we are in a position to make change, accepting that we are in today, we can't change the past, but we can live in the present, we can stop fretting about the future, because this is what creates this mindfulness monkey brain of ours, jumping from thought to thought to thought. Think about it. If you just sit for one moment and think about your minds jumping around, what is it that your minds are, what is the thoughts that your minds are jumping around from and to? It's what's going to happen in the future for you, isn't it? Primarily, that's what it is. And we get stuck with that so much that we forget to live in the moment. Look at who's next door to you. For instance, the wonderful person that, that made the effort to come with you, that you're sitting here, that you've got life, that you've got breath. That, do you understand what I mean? Any moment that you have is a wonderful moment because you're here and you're in it, and you can make the difference. So it's about awakening all of your senses, all 5 of them. You know, when you leave here today, this is something I like to do, is just to get myself in that zone. Walk in a place that you've walked many times, but view it as if it's the first time you've ever walked in it. And just see how it looks, how it feels, what you hear. You know, even the way you're walking, just be in touch with everything about yourself. Honestly, it is not spooky. It's quite amazing. It's quite amazing. You're starting to get in touch with you and your capabilities, more to the point. So the benefits are it enables you to master your mind. If you want to change your habits, you've got to master your mind. You don't want your mind mastering you. A really beautiful quote that I took away. I was in Thailand for a year working in the private rehab. They do a lot of Buddhist practice out there. I'm not a Buddhist. I do have a very, very strong faith. I do believe in a creator, but not a Buddhist faith. But this is really important because what Sharma says, he was a Buddhist monk, a beautiful quote was, the mind is a wonderful servant, but it's a terrible master. And I don't know if after what you've heard, if that makes sense to you, or even if you didn't have to hear it, if it makes sense to you. But do people understand what that phrase means? It's incredibly powerful that you can master your minds. You just have to know how to. And you just have to be in touch with it. It builds your self-confidence. Why would it? When you start to understand yourself, you start operating through a sense of self that is powerful. That you've told yourself, wow, I really can do this. And when you're doing things that you want to do, that's enhancing your self-confidence. People are noticing. The power to be your best self. Your best self is replacing those not so good habits with the good habits. Doing the things that you can do that meets your full potential, because we all have the potential to be whoever we want to be. If you see someone else can achieve it, so can you. We do need to be realistic, but within that scope, you can meet your full potential and be the best that you can be. It nurtures contentment. Of course it does. If you're feeling good, everything around you is good. Everyone around you is good. You will try to share that contentment with everyone, which enhances your quality of life. So we can't take that away, can we? So the conclusion is, they can cost you your job. But that's if we are accumulating lots of habits, and it's depending on the habits they are. But even if it's not costing you your job, it's at least costing you possibly your true, it should have had true up there, your true sense of self, because you have a sense of self anyway. But it's the true sense of self that it may be costing, the one that you're not aware of, the one that you're not operating through, the one that you need to be in order to be the best that you can be. So habits are not extinguished, they are replaced. You change and modify your habit loop. Something in the loop needs to change. It could well be the routine. It could just be the cue. It could just be the reward. It could be all of it. But something in the loop has to be modified for the habit to be changed from not so good to good. I didn't finish, sorry. And then yes, actually, yeah. Motivational mindfulness techniques increases the efficacy for change. So these are techniques that you can use to help create those changes. I do deliver training. I deliver workshops, and I'm also a therapist. But some of these, you can get this information online. You can. You know, you're sat in a university. I know that you're all smart people. I know that. Intellectually you are. So you can get all this information. But if you have a struggle, come to me. Okay? So to change your life, change your habits. And I always believe, oh, it's gone. That there's no habit, that's what you should have said. No habit is impossible to change once you have the desire to change it. And so, my dear people, thank you for listening.